Hello, and welcome to Reel Film Snobs. I'm pleased to have with me on the show today filmmaker, musician, and friend, Sean Farris. Hi, Sean. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much for having me back. I'm very happy to be here.
Good. You look happy too. You're in the bunker, as we talked about before we started taping. Sean
Yes.
is hiding out, waiting for everything that's to come in 2025. But in the meantime, we're here to talk. This is actually a really exciting episode that Sean actually had the idea for. We're going to be talking about female animation artists, and specifically three today. We're going to be talking about Suzan Pitt, Allison Schulnik, and Carolyn Leaf. And if you haven't heard of those names, then you will get to introduce more about them to you. I have to give a shout out, of course, to Sean's crew at Chop Motion Films, who did the intro to our show, and many, many other fantastic animated films. And I'm curious, Sean, to get from your perspective, because this was your idea, what made you think of this? And, animated shorts, animated films in general, are not widely recognized outside, of course, the big ones like Disney and, Pixar and all that. But animated shorts, even less so. So maybe talk a little bit about, why you were inspired to do this episode.
It kind of started with Susan Pitt. It was relatively recently that I kind of became aware of her in the past few years. And I thought, well, maybe if we talked about her, but then that kind of leads to thinking about, there's plenty of other animators we could talk about. And I personally feel like it's not that animation doesn't work for feature length stuff, but in short film format, I think is kind of optimal for some of these. I kind of feel like with animation, it's almost like you're eating a really rich dessert. And so sometimes you get that in a good 10 or 20-minute bite, and it kind of is a better way to digest some of this stuff. Um, and so, just from there, it kind of made me think of others. And then you had, the good suggestion of Caroline Leaf, and just we have quite a platter of animation today to
Yeah.
consume and talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, and all of this is available on streaming. We'll talk about that when we get to each artist. I'm going to talk a little bit about our first artist, so I'll just jump right in if that's okay with you. Susan Pitt, so she was kind of the reason we thought of doing this episode, or that you did, 1943 to 2019 when she passed away. But Susan Pitt was born and grew up in Kansas City, Missouri. And then she began, like a lot of animators, she started as an artist. She started making animated films in 1968, and she had an installation at the Whitney Museum in 1979 with her film Asparagus, which we will be talking about, which is her most well-known film and probably the one that both you and I were first introduced to. And it was her most well-known film in part because it was paired with Eraserhead and Midnight Showings when that film came out, and that kind of exposed Susan Pitt's work to a larger audience. And I think it is appropriate that it was paired with Eraserhead. It's a different style. Her work is very colorful, for instance, very different from Eraserhead. But in terms of being extremely trippy and a little bit psychedelic, I think it works in that way. And then she received a Guggenheim Fellowship. She was a former associate professor at Harvard, and she has the Academy Film Archive actually has preserved many of her films, including several of the ones we're going to be talking about today. She traveled widely in the 1990s to Mexico and Guatemala, which actually inspired two of the films we'll be talking about, Joy Street and El Doctor. So I was excited because her films, other than Asparagus, a lot of her work is not very well known. And so I thought it would be exciting. So we're going to talk about four today, and we can just kind of make this a little bit loose. But I thought we'd start off with the first one, Jefferson Circus Songs. This is one of her earlier films, 1974. I'm excited to talk about this one with you, Sean, because as I was watching it and my husband and I were watching it together, I said, "Oh, this reminds me a lot of the Farris family work." This is the one that I thought seemed the most like your work, actually. It's whimsical, but also grotesque in parts. Uses children, of course, in the child actors in kind of bizarre and unique ways, which your work often does as well. That sounds a little bit weird now that I'm saying it. Uses children in bizarre ways. Not in anything bad, people, nothing bad, but it's got this. It has the live action stop motion blended with animation, which reminded me of your work. Curious what you thought about this one.
Yeah, as you can imagine, I'm a big fan of this film, and it did make me think a little bit about some of the filmmaking situations that I've been in. In my case, sometimes it was literally just, you're in a living room and you make a strange little set and you grab your younger sibling or whoever's around and dress them up in strange clown makeup or whatever and get going. And so, but out of those kinds of situations, and for me, it was kind of born out of situations of a kind of constraint. But kids are amazing. It's just there's something about kids, and there's kind of an openness to this strange, fantastical world, and it just seems to make sense. So yeah,
Yeah.
I really liked the technique, filming the kids in stop motion. I've heard some refer to this as they call pixelation, and you get some really interesting effects there. It almost looks like you're looking at time-lapse footage sped up or something, and you're seeing things kind of jiggling in the background. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed this film. It kind of stands apart from some of the other ones we're going to talk about today,
Yeah,
and being more
because of the
just straight
use
up,
of people, or what do you
yeah,
think? Yeah.
or yeah, you're seeing people, and it's a little bit more, there's a little bit of strangeness and darkness and grotesquerie, but it seems to be a little bit more just straight up whimsical.
Hmm.
Um,
Not as dark
Whereas,
as the later stuff.
yeah, some of the other stuff it gets a little bit more heavy. But yeah, I love this film.
Yeah, it's great, and it has a little bit less narrative, I'd say, also than some of the other ones we're about to talk
Yeah,
about,
yeah,
particularly the later ones that have actually kind of like a story. So let's get to Asparagus, 1979. So this is, of course, her most well-known film, paired with Eraserhead. If you hated Eraserhead, don't let, or if you loved it, either way, don't let it ward you off from watching this. It's not really like that. It's a very phallic film, which lots of filleting of the asparagus in this film. I think I can say that on prime time. I hope so because I just said it. But yes, so this is a very gosh, I don't know how to describe it. Maybe you can do a better job than me, Sean. I'm trying to figure out a way to describe asparagus.
yeah. It's difficult to just yeah. We're seeing more or less traditional, hand-drawn animation in this one, and a lot of use of her use of color is just amazing.
Yeah.
Um, and so it kind of starts off in kind of a crude way. Like you said, there's sort of some elements to this that are a little bit kind of a little bit lewd or crude, like in the right from the opening shot.
Hmm.
Um, but I'm sort of surprised at like, it still has a kind of a dignity about it. It's not like you're watching it and you're just it's just repulsive or something. It's just it has
Hmm.
a strange kind of beauty and a flow to it that you just kind of follow through. I mean, you're there's a faceless lady wearing a mask, and she's a 2D animation, and she's projecting, her 2D, her world onto this audience of clay animated people. And so it's like there's a lot going on here. Like,
Right, the theater set up in
yeah,
claymation. Yeah, and I forgot to mention it uses traditional animation, but then there's the claymation part, which is
hmm
again different than Jefferson Circus songs. So she's incorporating different styles, which I thought
hmm
really interesting. And that little theater she creates for when the faceless woman unleashes her bag of
hmm
of kaleidoscopic wonders into the theater is pretty amazing. That whole set is fantastic, I thought.
yeah, that was pretty an amazing. short film. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you could see why it got so much attention. And then we move on then from the 70s. We don't have any from the 80s, although she consistently worked. But one thing I found interesting reading her biography online is, like a lot of animation artists, and I think this includes the next two we'll talk about, she really made her living more as a painter, as a visual artist. The animated films didn't bring the money in, but the visual art did. So our next film is Joy Street from 1995, because I thought it would be interesting to explore different eras of her work. And this one I had not seen before now. And this is also this is where we start to get much darker in some ways. It follows a woman who's kind of in a urban dwelling, very depressed, just drinking and smoking cigarettes. And then all of a sudden she is sort of transported. Actually, the monkey, I think, on her ashtray comes to life, and then she's transported into this kind of rainforest, beautiful, vivid color world of animals and creatures and sounds. And so it goes from this very depressing setting into this joyful setting. And so there is a little bit more of a story with this one as we ramp up here. There's more story, narrative features. Curious about your thoughts on this one, Sean, from an animator's perspective.
Yeah, again, I was pretty amazed by this movie. I feel like in some ways this is kind of a fall, maybe probably not intended by the filmmaker. I don't know, but to me, I feel a connection to Asparagus in a way, like it's a progression from that, possibly. I guess in that it seems like there's sort of an isolated kind of a female protagonist, and so in this one, as you said, it's very clearly, unambiguously kind of about her depression and like suicide and suicidal ideation, and then in a kind of it's funny, it's kind of simplistic. It's like, oh, she's saved by this cartoonish world of color, and it's like that's not necessarily a groundbreaking idea, but for whatever reason I found this to be emotionally effective. I really, there's a scene in it where this almost Mickey Mouse like cartoon colorful
Hmm.
character is trying to revive her, and he's trying to hold up her limp body. It's like, look at the world. And it was surprisingly, yeah, it kind of got
Effective,
me.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's like, well, look at the beauty in the world.
Mhm.
There's still things, despite how dire things. This is a good
Yeah,
movie to watch this year. Despite
yeah,
how dire things may be, there's still beauty and joy in the world, and I think that's the overall message. But it's also just a beautiful
yeah.
animated short as well.
Hmm.
And then, so finally, move on to 2006, El Doctor, which is influenced by her travels to Mexico. Features, I think this is the only one, in fact, that features full on like voice casting with characters who talk. And this is about a very depressed doctor who is tired of his job and just drinking himself silly and doesn't care about anything, including the patients he's treating. And he has a very, how should we say, colorful cast of characters in the hospital he works in. And then again, we have a transformation that happens where he starts to feel alive again and inspired by his work, I guess. But this one is definitely the most in some ways grotesque, because we're dealing with, like, there's scene where he cuts open the guy's stomach and all of his insides file out, and then the guy weaves them around, but it's done in a very humorous way. Again, it's not grotesque, like just like, oh, it's like I mean, we were watching it and laughing when the guy winds his intestines around the building and then curls them back up to stuff them back into his body. So there's some again, some of this reminds me of your work unintentionally, because you obviously hadn't seen her work when a lot of the Chop motion films were made. But you have like some gross stuff in your films, but it's always done in this humorous way. Um,
Hmm.
that reminded me of this.
Oh, well, that is quite flattering, and yeah, I really like this one a lot as well. And I mean, I was kind of like, at first it seemed a little bit episodic. It's like, oh, all these different patients and these different grotesque things happening. But by the end of it, though, like I kind of like they have this idea of the saint of holes, the saint of nothingness, that
Hmm.
kind of is helping this
Yeah.
doctor to come to terms with, and of course it makes you think of the world we live in, and like look, viewing it through the eyes of a doctor, somebody maybe who's wanting to help this kind of a hallway of horrors that we walk through of life, and is
Yeah.
finding some strange way to kind of cope with cope with
Yeah.
it and accept it and all that. So there's a lot going on with that. This one kind of almost had the style of it almost made me think a little bit of like, I don't know, I've seen some Soviet animated movies from a certain time period that's some really strange and bizarre stuff.
Oh,
And it
we
just
should
evoked,
do those
yeah.
sometime. Yeah.
Oh,
Or
that would be a good episode. Yeah.
or
It
just
kind of,
animated those shorts from other countries because there's also some really interesting ones I know from the former Czechoslovakia as well. So it would be
yes.
fun to do. I should mention the music uniformly in most of her movies is really terrific, especially in Asparagus. But I didn't want to leave out the music as well because,
Yeah.
like your films, she uses music really well. So all of these are available right now on the streaming service Mubi. You can also find them. Where else can you find them? I know for Criterion Channel had some for a while. Maybe YouTube.
Yeah. I think some of them are on YouTube, but I think, yeah, when I saw her, it was on Criterion, but I'm not sure. I haven't been on there lately as much, so I don't know if her stuff is still up
Yeah,
on
I
there,
thought,
but
but Mubi is where I watched all of them.
yeah.
So make sure to check them out. Okay, now we'll go to this is a filmmaker you picked, so I'll let you introduce Allison.
Yeah. So, I'm talking about Allison Schulnik, and she's a painter, sculptor, and animator. And actually, I just saw that she just recently had an exhibition of her work. Like she does a lot of, I kind of like Susan Pitt. There's some similarities with Susan Pitt in some ways. And in her case, I know that there's the animated films, but there's a lot of sculpting and painting that she is involved in as well. And just I think last month she had an exhibition in New York or something like that. So I first became aware of this artist. Really, I come a little bit from the world of music videos myself, and so I'd seen music videos she did for the band Grizzly Bear, and so that's what kind of introduced me to her. The first film that I was going to talk about was a film called Eager. It's kind of hard to describe. There's not a narrative. We are working primarily in claymation here. And for Eager, there's it sort of centers around these kind of ghostly wraith-like figures. They're sort of doing this, almost looks like they're, yoga in the spirit realm, sort of a ritual. They're stretching and moving. And then we're moving through this garden with all these writhing plants. And it's sort of, I kind of thought of it's almost like with all the plants and the music going, it's sort of like a silly symphony gone wrong. Anyhow, and so yeah, it's hard to describe narratively what's happening in this, but again, it made me think of Susan Pitt and where she has a lot of color and the jungle stuff comes in. And in this case,
Hmm.
it's with writhing flowers and these kind of things going on. But yeah, I am curious what you thought of Eager.
Yeah, I liked actually both of the films. I liked Eager. I probably liked the other one that we're going to talk about later, Hobo Clown, better. But I did like it. I like a little bit. It's just my personal preference. A little bit more of at least somewhat of a story to grasp onto. Although the one is almost like basically a music video, which again reminded me a little bit of your work. Although I actually think your stuff is better for your music videos, at least than this. But I liked the tactile nature of her work. That's what I really liked about it. I think in Eager she's using like there's like paper maybe. Is it like does it seem like it's like paper or
Yeah, I'm not
the figures at
exactly
the
the
beginning that kind of
figures.
come
Yeah,
in? Yeah, they look like, yeah, so I'm not sure what material she used, but it looks tactile, I guess is the best way to describe it,
yeah,
rather than drawn animation. And I really liked that. And I liked the look of it. So, yeah, and like most of the all the artists we're talking about today, Allison is more well known. She's represented by a gallery down in California and more well known for like visual art than the animated movies. But because that's I think where she makes her living. But I think the animation is very interesting. So yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and the other film, Hobo Clown, you said you liked that one maybe a little bit more. That I get again, that one's kind of short and sweet, but it sort of follows the title character, Hobo Clown. It's kind of everything in this film almost looks a little bit like it's, the kind of melted ice cream frosting sort of a look.
Yeah, I liked that look.
Yeah, I really liked it, and it kind of starts off. It almost looks like he's like in a boxcar or something. Think of a boxcar hobo, sort of the stereotype, and then he moves into what kind of looks like maybe sort of an afterlife or something in this other world of this kind of pillowy, marshmallowy, melty stuff going on with other hobo clowns. And I believe the hobo clown is kind of like a character that this artist sort of has recurring through different maybe pieces of her work, and in films and stuff. And so what did you think of Hobo Clown? Well, I mean, I know you liked it,
Yeah,
but
no, I really liked this one, and I loved the visual style of the melting visuals. Again, kind of not psychedelic isn't the right word, but it's a little
yeah,
trippy, like the melting of the colors. The use of color in this one I really liked. Um, and it's set to a song. I think this is the one that's set to the song by Grizzly Bear. Is that correct? Or is that Eager?
that one is I don't have that information up currently.
Yeah,
Sorry.
but it's set to a song,
But
and
yeah, it's
it's like a music video. So that I think this one is the one because it's a little shorter,
mhm,
and I think that works. I would have liked the if I liked the music better, I probably would have liked the short better. So I kept
mhm,
thinking, I was trying to picture this animation on top of, oh, for instance, Sean's band, Mysterious Sailor, like better music, and I
oh,
like it even more. So, but yeah, I did enjoy it. So she doesn't have as many films. In fact, I didn't see any recent ones, like super recent. So I wonder if she's
no,
focusing more
yeah,
on the visual arts now.
yeah, yeah. That's what it looked like to me,
So let's
maybe.
move on. If you're okay, are you okay
Yeah,
moving on to Carolyn
yeah.
Leaf? So we'll move on to Carolyn Leaf, who's our next artist we're going to talk about. Born 1946, still going, present, a Canadian American filmmaker, animator, director, and artist. Again, also a visual artist. So Carolyn, I actually was introduced to her work by my husband, who was on Canopy. Or if for those who don't know and don't have it, you should get Canopy. Canopy is free. It's a free streaming site available through your local library, and you can just stream all sorts of movies, from mainstream movies to art house to educational movies. And they have an interview with her from this show called The Screening Room. That was a popular show in this. Well, I don't know if it was that popular. Actually, it was on, I think public television, but it was a show that in the 70s that just focused on independent filmmakers of all kinds, but they had to be independent. So usually avant-garde, experimental, truly independent, no studio type films. And they interviewed her. There's also one with Suzan Pitt in The Screening Room where they interview her as well. And so, and my husband said, hey, they showed clips of this Carolyn Leaf. You should check her out. So I went and looked at it, and she pioneered this use of sand. It's really, really cool. So, of using beach sand spread on a light box to make a movement and to make animated movies out of sand. And it's a really innovative technique that she really pioneered, and she also did paint on glass animation. So the two films of hers, and again, she continues to work. She also worked with the National Film Board of Canada, and for many years, and a lot of her films were put out through them. So it's really, really amazing work. So the first film, 1978, The Metamorphosis of Mr. Samsa, is really kind of a take on Franz Kafka's The Metamorphosis. And so, and done just again, I love the creepy weirdness of this one, the style of the animation, loved the music. And if you know anything about The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka, then you kind of get the idea of the story here. But I'm really interested to hear what you have to think, Sean, because what you think about her work, because I know that you hadn't seen her work before.
No, somehow I hadn't, and it's kind of a revelation seeing this particular. Yeah, there's a lot of different kinds of animation that you've seen over the years, and you kind of become accustomed to, and it's all amazing. And then something like this, I sit down and I'm just kind of sitting and figuring out how in the world did
Yeah.
somebody do this? It is so beyond my. So it's just like a whole new form, kind of seeing it. Um, and yeah, I was just kind of taken aback by this. I mean, in a good way. Uh,
Yeah.
I'd seen a comment online about somebody said, "Oh, that Caroline Leaf, it's like she's like the Joni Mitchell of animation." And I thought that was kind of funny. But it's like if you mean she's just like legendary and revered and like amazing at her craft, then that seems to be accurate in this case. So
Okay. I was trying to
yeah,
figure out the correlation there. So
no,
that's why I was
I
like,
don't.
okay, interesting.
I just thought it
Um,
was a funny comment, but I I think that's what I read from it anyway.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's great. Well, so our next film, this is one I really want to talk about actually. So it's kind
Yeah.
of sucks we kept it to the end because I loved this one. Two Sisters from 1991, and we actually have a clip for you to look at.
My God, the doors.
Okay, you just saw a clip from Two Sisters from Carolyn Leaf, and this is from 1991. This is a story, an original story, unlike the other one, about these two sisters who live together in this house, and one is an amazing writer, and you see her writing and typing at the beginning of the film, but she is sequestered into the house because she has a disfigured face, and it's obvious that her sister has kind of kept her from, or the other sister has kind of kept her from the outside world, and then a visitor, a fan of this sister's work shows up one day to the house and changes everything. I think that's sort of a good summation of the story. The animation on this one really blew me away. I thought it was amazing, and I think kind of a progression from the Metamorphosis. Actually, I thought this work was more daring, more interesting visually, just pretty amazing. It pretty much blew me away.
Likewise, yeah, I was very blown away by this, and I had to look up afterwards, like, how did she do this? It looked like they're saying she was doing the etching on film technique, which is just
Oh,
mind-boggling that you're able to get that much characterization in that form. I just can't even believe it.
did she use
It's,
sand at all in this one?
I think this one, it looked like it was all the
The
etching,
etching on film, yeah, because it has so much movement. But
yeah,
then there's a
yeah.
lot of use of dark spaces where, like for instance, when the one sister is typing on the keyboard, you just see her hands in darkness. But because of the sound of the clickety clack, we know what she's doing. Even though
hmm
you can't actually see a computer or a keyboard in that scene. Like I don't know, I thought it was pretty amazing.
Yeah, I think and I really respect about this filmmaker that it looked like a lot of her work is adapting literary stuff into short film. I think when you're doing animation, sometimes it's very easy to lean on, just lean into the strange and the abstract and non-narrative, but to really try to have a narrative in there, especially in this kind of animation and the way she's doing it is truly amazing. Like that she's
Yeah,
pulling it
I
off
think
so
that's why
well.
I liked it so much because I like a little
hmm
story, even if it's
Yeah.
simplistic. Your work often has stories. Like you look back to your earliest work, and you and your family. I shouldn't just say you, but your family, like Larry the Amazing Spider. Yeah, it's about a boy who meets a spider, but there's a story there, right? So, I mean, I like a little bit of a story to hold the weirdness together. I suppose that's my own personal preference, but really exciting to view all these filmmakers. There's so many more out there. I know we have to wrap up, but also check out Chop Motion Films. Like, where can people find your stuff, Sean, and your family's work?
Primarily it's on YouTube at
YouTube.
this point. That being said, I want to get better renders and better high res. I need to go through and compile it a little bit better so some of it looks better, but most of it's just up on YouTube at this
Yeah, so if
point.
you just put on YouTube Chop Motion Films, you can also find Sean's work and his family's work. They're a company together. Of course, they did the introduction to Reel Film Snobs, all of them that we've had over the years, including the current one. We've had a few different ones, and really appreciate your time today, Sean. It was exciting to talk about these filmmakers together, and I would love to do another one, maybe looking at international animated shorts. That would be really fun.
Yes,
So,
thank you.
as always, you can find us on reelfilmsnobs.com or on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe to our channel. Thank you very much. Have a great day and great movies.